Welcome everyone. I am Kyle Whitehead. I use he, him pronouns. I manage policy and communications with the Active Transportation Alliance. For anyone who's not familiar, although I imagine most of you are, we advocate for walking, biking, and public transit to create healthy, sustainable, and equitable communities. I think we just want to start off with some introductions. So if you could put your name and town and any organizational affiliation you may have, if you have one, drop that in the chat box. And I am going to ask some of my colleagues to introduce themselves, who you'll hear from throughout the presentation. Maggie, you want to?
Yeah, hi everyone. Welcome to our discussion today. My name is Maggie Sherwinski. I go by she, her pronouns. I am an advocacy manager at the Active Transportation Alliance, and I'll pass it along to Amy.
Hey everybody, happy afternoon. I'm Amy Reinell, Executive Director of the Active Transportation Alliance, and I use she, her pronouns as well. On to you, Dave.
Last but not least, right? Dave Simmons, Executive Director of Riot Illinois. We are the statewide bike advocacy organization, used to be known as the League of Illinois Bicyclists. Our mission is to make Illinois better through biking. So we're excited to be part of this conversation with folks, hopefully all over the state. I do see some friendly names and then others I don't know. So welcome everybody.
So why are we here? Hopefully some of you are at least a little bit familiar, but we, Active Transportation Alliance and Riot Illinois, are in the process of developing a sustainable transportation platform for the upcoming statewide elections and the gubernatorial race in particular. Our goal with this platform is to highlight the policies and programs that we think the next governor and the next General Assembly should embrace to build a more sustainable and equitable and healthy transportation network, not just in the Chicago region, but across the entire state of Illinois. So the platform will be used to educate candidates and voters about various transportation issues. We did do this in 2018, and we developed a platform and a candidate questionnaire, and had some success in using that platform to help develop relationships with the governor and members of the General Assembly, and those relationships contributed to some significant wins over the last several years, including dedicated funding for walking, biking, and public transit in the Capitol bill in 2019, and then just more recently eliminating the local match, the requirement for municipalities to cover 20% of the cost for walking and biking infrastructure on state roads. Thanks to our legislation and leadership from Representative Moeller, that is no longer the case. So state covering 100% of the cost of that infrastructure. So those are just a couple examples of some high impact policy changes that originated in a platform like this. You go to the next slide, Maggie. So as many of you know, we are a 501c3 not for-profit organization, as is Riot Illinois. So that means there are some restrictions on the level of political activity we can undertake. It does not obviously prevent us from doing something like this, which is developing a platform, laying out what we think should happen, and encouraging candidates and ultimately elected officials to embrace that platform. It also allows us to develop a candidate questionnaire and ask candidates their perspectives on these issues. So that's something we are planning to do soon after developing the platform, have a candidate questionnaire that allows people and candidates to share their thoughts on the issues that are highlighted in the platform. So we will publish the results of that candidate questionnaire on our websites and give voters like you the opportunity to evaluate it. So we are not allowed to score the questionnaire responses or say candidate X is better than candidate Y on transportation, but we can share the information and let the public determine how they want that to influence their vote. So the key dates to keep in mind, we have the primary election on June 28th. Governor Pritzker, our incumbent governor, Democratic governor, is running for re-election, and the race on the Republican side is very competitive. There are many candidates and not clear who it may be the front runner or leading the race right now, which is part of the reason why we want to be developing this platform. Is we're hoping to be able to use the platform and a candidate questionnaire to start engaging with these Republican candidates now, to hopefully put us in a stronger position to engage with whoever comes out of the primary during the general election, and make sure we have strong outreach to both candidates that will appear on the ballot in November. I'm going to pass it on to Dave for some more details. I'll just say one more a kind of logistical thing is we very much want this to be an informal conversation with all of you. That's why we're here, to hear from you. I mean, many of us professionals work and talk about these issues all the time, but we don't get an opportunity to talk with residents and people outside our organizations. So please jump into the chat with comments or questions. Feel free to raise your hand during the course of the meeting and the presentation, and we'll try to pause and make sure we can answer your question. If you want to go on camera and unmute and make your comment directly to us, we welcome that as well, especially in the discussion portion at the end. So please feel free to be proactive in terms of engaging in this conversation. Dave, take it away.
Thank you, Kyle. Thanks for that overview. It's important, to remind ourselves, as in those that work for the organizations, about what we are capable of doing as a 501c3 and kind of where we need to draw the line. So I always appreciate hearing that again. But we just wanted to touch briefly on the importance of this upcoming election. And as you can see by the bullet points here and the photos, which really do a great job of describing some of the challenges that our current transportation system presents or is undergoing, such as greenhouse gas emissions. You've probably read or heard that transportation is the #1 producer of greenhouse gases. So by having and promoting a sustainable transportation platform and a future, we can help to cut greenhouse gas emissions. I used the example, we did the session last night. I live in the northwest suburbs in Elk Grove Village, and many of the roads out here are really just meant to move cars. So by discussing sustainable transportation, biking, walking, public transit, micromobility, and being able to publish a platform and getting that in front of candidates to make a dent, right? And to make those modes of transportation more prominent in our society can certainly help and give folks options. And that's where it kind of bleed into the fact that walking and biking has been unsafe because of the priorities for the motor vehicles. You've likely heard or read in the news, cyclist and pedestrian fatality rates have increased over the last few years, even though there's been fewer people in motor vehicles on the road. So we really want to make the point that we need safe places for people to bike and walk in order for them to do so and to increase that mode share. And then when it comes to public transit, it's not typically reliable certainly in some areas, I should say. I don't want to overuse the term there, but it can be unreliable, which means people aren't going to use it. We really need reliable, timely means of people using public transportation to get from point A to point B. And typically where that service is unreliable, that tends to be in neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods of Black and brown communities. And because there is no safe public transportation, they're taking chances, such as the photo in the bottom right. There's not a good place to walk or take public transportation in that example. So your input is going to be really important to inform this platform to make sure that we as advocacy organizations are speaking on your behalf and making sure that the candidates are hearing not only from you in other ways, but also from our organizations to say, hey, these are important topics, and we're ready for sustainable transportation in the state of Illinois. Next slide, please, Megan. All right, so it's probably goes without saying the governor's role, or the governor is an important position, right? And these bullet points speak to the power that individual has. IDOT, our state Department of Transportation, has a secretary, and that secretary is appointed by the governor, as well as the transit boards. So as you can see, RTA, PACE, Metro CTA. So the person that fills that governor role and the decisions that individual makes is going to have a ripple effect on transportation in general. So we want to make sure that the governor, whoever he or she is informed when they take office about our concerns and our priorities. So it's not the first time they hear some of these things, they don't have maybe a negative reaction. We want them to know about them when they're ready to take office. And then policy. Policy drives so many decisions. So to be able to influence the transportation policy, that's yet something else that the governor and IDOT do. And so you see some of the statistics here, and the funding that's coming to the state over the next few years is a generational opportunity, maybe multi-generational in terms of when we might see this again. So we really want to make sure that these funds are used not only to repair the infrastructure that exists, but also to build infrastructure that is going to make biking, walking, and transit safer, more convenient, more effective. And then lastly, for the governor, as the head of the state, he or she will have veto power. So can veto legislation, again, by getting information to the candidates, to the eventual governor early on, and repeating that message. We feel that'll have an important impact on where our transportation network and system goes in the years to come. I think, over to you, Maggie.
Thanks, Dave. So now it is time for all of you to be involved in some discussion. So we're going to start with using Mentimeter. And if you haven't used that before, it's a place where you can take polls, votes, but you can do it on your phone or your computer. So I'll explain how to get to Mentimeter in a moment. But after we do that, we'll jump into more of the informal discussion where we might drill down into a couple topics, and it'll be a chance for you all to ask questions, share any additional feedback or ideas. You can use the chat, you can raise your hand, and just so you're aware, so all of the policy ideas that during the Mentimeter, we're going to kind of briefly share some details about some policy ideas that we wanted to get your input on. And these are issues that over the years, they've surfaced through our advocacy work, through both of our organizations, through individuals, through community partners, through elected officials, through just looking at what other states are doing, what other cities are doing. And we wanted to bring all of these ideas to you to see, what are your thoughts? Like, do you think these policy ideas are important? Are they needed? Are they winnable? Are they achievable? But before we jump into Mentimeter, a couple of ground rules just to go over. So I know we only have a limited amount of time, so we might have to move some of the discussion along, and we can follow up with you later if there's something you're really interested in knowing more about. If you are speaking, just be conscious of your airtime, so we just give everyone a chance to participate. Make sure your microphone is muted if you're not speaking, so we don't get background noise interference. And with all of these policy ideas, there are definitely differing opinions, and that's okay. There are no right or wrong answers. We're really curious to hear what you all think. And it helps us kind of think about all of the different angles and things that we're not currently thinking about. So please, share your feedback and your thoughts and keep the conversation respectful as well. So, Mentimeter. So if you have your phone, you can scan that QR code and that'll bring you to the Menti website, or you can on your phone or computer type menti.com, and there's that code that will also get you to Mentimeter. And I'm going to open up, I'm going to stop sharing the PowerPoint, and I'm going to open up Menti so you can see the results. And Amy shared the link in the chat. Thank you, Amy. One moment. Okay. So here we are. So the first question we have to get you all warmed up: what do you love most about walking, biking, and transit? And it looks like a lot of you are on already. And again, that go to menti.com, and the code is 14840637. So what do we see here? We've got healthy is popping up. So is freedom.
Is it just me or do we lose
No,
Maggie?
Maggie, I think we lost your audio.
Sorry, I hit a button. Thanks. Okay, yeah, look, these are great adjectives and descriptions. Lots of brain massage. Lots of good ideas, but I'll move on. So next question. Are you planning to vote in the primary election? So that would be on June 28th. We just want to make sure to get that date in your head. So and make sure to share that date with your family and friends. Looks like we've got a lot of yeses, which is great. And if you do have any questions about how to vote in the primary election, we're happy to chat offline about that as well. But looks like there's lots of active voters here, which is great. All right, let's go to the next one. So now we're wondering, are you going to vote in the general election? So that's on November 8th. And hopefully if you were voting in the primary, you'll be interested in voting in the general. And it looks like we're seeing similar results. So great. All right, so now we wanted to get your thoughts about these policy ideas, and we have a survey out there right now that many of you may have already taken. So these are ideas from the survey. So we'll just briefly explain them. And if you need any clarification, we're happy to speak more about them. But first one here is provide more funding for transit service. So that would be transit operations to increase the frequency of bus service and train routes across the state. So that this is actually a section of the transportation of public transit that doesn't often get a lot of funding. So that's one thing we could push the governor to sign legislation to do. The next one here is provide more funding to expand transit routes. So that would be having more locations where there's a bus stop and more rails on the ground. And then that third policy idea here is provide free transit fares for all youth. And this is an idea that came up a few years ago. We produced a report called the Fair Fares Report that really did a lot of community engagement, talked to a lot of community partners and the transit agencies, and this was a policy idea that came out of that. So we'll go to the next slide. So these 4 policy ideas are more focused on walking and biking policies. So this first one is about eliminating jaywalking laws, and that would make it legal for people to cross mid-block or to cross against traffic lights when it's safe. It's been considered in several states and cities more recently, and so It's something we're wondering if we should look at in Illinois. Part of the reason it's an important topic to look at is jaywalking laws are often not enforced fairly, and there's racial disparities at play. So we can talk more about that topic later. But the next one here is allowing bikes to treat stop signs as yield. So this is also a policy idea that's come up in several other states with some mixed results. But I believe that at least 5 or 6 states have this law. Idaho is kind of a famous example of a state that has this policy. Third here is lowering the default speed limit. State law currently prevents cities from lowering default speed limits on any street without signing every street that departs from that default speed limit. So 30 miles per hour is the default speed limit in most towns across our state. So it can be very expensive for a city if they wanted to reduce that speed limit to 25 miles per hour, or 20 miles per hour on roads throughout their community. It's often cost prohibitive for a community to do that. And then fourth here is would be establishing a walk bike maintenance fund for the state to help lower income communities pay for maintenance, for maintaining side paths and sidewalks on state roads. And so right now when state roads are built, municipalities have to foot the bill for ongoing maintenance. And then as a result, many communities do have to turn down that potential sidewalk or side path because out of fear of not being able to maintain it. So we'll go to the next section here. So these are more related to looking at IDOT and our complete streets law. So this first policy idea is about evaluating and improving our state's complete streets law. And so our state developed this law in 2007. And the law states that bicyclists and pedestrians should need to be considered when state roads are reconstructed or improved. But the law was developed kind of at the beginning of when states were developing these laws, and since then there are a lot of states have more advanced laws that can help communities or help states and communities have more success of actually accommodating bicyclists and pedestrians on state roads. And then second here is establishing a clear and transparent process for selecting major transportation projects that are centered on racial equity and addressing climate change. And right now there's no clear process for selecting these projects, and the state's multi-year plan, IDOT's multi-year plan, is focused on highway planning, and there's no long-term planning for walking, biking, or transit. So, that's something we could potentially push the governor to create that transparency and that centering projects on racial equity and climate change. And then finally, as Dave was talking about, the importance of the IDOT secretary on making project decisions. So the governor, we could push the governor to appoint a secretary that's committed to racial equity and addressing climate change. So, all right. So thanks for all of your responses. Just looking back, it looks like most are at a 4 or above. The ones that maybe have more variety of opinions, it's eliminating jaywalking laws. I think over here, the providing free transit for youth, and the bikes treating stop signs as yield, which so we've got that survey out there, and we have almost 400 people have taken the survey now, and those are actually the 3 that do have the most have varying opinions, whether it's strongly agree or disagree, or a lot of people were just unsure. or didn't have an opinion, but we thought we could potentially dig into one of those in our group discussion. So we have another question here. Which of the following policy ideas would you like to discuss in more depth? So the jaywalking law, the stop sign is yield, free transit fares for youth, or other. If you have another idea that you'd like to talk about, please share that in the chat. And you can vote for up to 2. So give you a moment to decide, and then we can jump into a discussion. Okay. There's interest really in everything. But it looks like the treating stop signs as yield right now has the most votes, followed by providing free transit for youth. And then jaywalking, though those are getting more votes now. Oh no, there's a tie. All right, free transit for youth. I'll give you guys 20 more seconds to vote. Still see there's a couple more people that haven't voted. Okay,
I
5
think
more
it's
seconds.
important to just quickly note, this is statewide policy that we're hoping to share with candidates. So, some things may be more Chicago centric or city centric, not that they're not important, but just to kind of keep that in mind as we jump into these.
Yeah, that's a good point. And like, I think thinking about all of these policy ideas on a few levels is helpful. Like thinking about like personally, how does this affect you? But then also thinking about your community. How does this affect people in your community? And then also thinking bigger picture, like how does this affect other people in the state? So maybe not everything directly affects you, but it is affecting, likely affecting a large number of people across the state. So, all right, so we've got our final results. The providing free transit fare for youth got the most votes, but I'll stop sharing this. And actually, before we get into discussion, I'll just share with you the results we saw from the survey, just so you're aware of what the other policy ideas, how people were feeling. So again, we have 385 responses. The complete streets law, the transit service, transit routes, funding, those were definitely, most people were strongly agreeing to those policy ideas. And again, like those 3 that you voted on, we're getting a variety of opinions. So again, we want to hear from you about your thoughts, questions, concerns. So I'll stop